All right, how's everyone doing this afternoon? Good? Woohoo! All right, we'll go ahead and get started. My name's Todd Kaufman. I'm here today to talk to you about finding joy at work. Justin Searles, who gave the keynote this morning, he and I started Test Double, almost 3.5 years ago. And really, my goals with starting Test Double was to find something that I hadn't found yet in my current employers. I was sitting largely, where I'm guessing some of you are now, in a situation where maybe I'm not completely fulfilled, right? What I would advise you is starting a company, maybe not the path for everyone to happiness, right? Like 3.5 years in, I've found out that starting a company is really, really hard. We're extremely fortunate to be where we are and have the success that we've had. I was commiserating with Jeff Cashmere about this earlier, and I feel like, Justin and I have created this environment of developer happiness that we hope all of our employees are within. But usually the owners are the last two people to get the happiness, right? So I'm not trying to get you all to start new companies, don't get me wrong. Hopefully I can share some lessons with you guys that will, just maybe serve as an example, maybe frame some thoughts in your own mind about your own path to happiness. So on that note, how many people are happy at their jobs? For the most part, right? Working on challenging problems, good. Like all of the people except for Justin raised their hand to Test Double. Right, for the most part, you enjoy your work. You enjoy the people that you work with. Almost everybody raised their hand, which is good. Maybe we'll just wrap this up and go have a beer. For the most part, there's no major issues. You come home, you're happy, thumbs up. Anybody extremely, upset, pissed off? I appreciate your honesty. Last time I gave this talk, actually one of our employees raised his hand. I think he was just trolling me. Just kind of figuring Justin would do that here. Right? I've been there, all right, and it's not fun whatsoever. Right? I've been in environments where really it led to me, just being a horrible parent, father, husband at home, just all in all a miserable person. Like it consumed me. Right? People typically in this state, like what's the worst sound you ever hear on TV? It's that clock from 60 Minutes, right? Because it's 7 o'clock on Sunday, and you're like, oh man, I got to go to work tomorrow. This is brutal, right? This is a horrible state to be in, don't get me wrong. But it's not the worst. Is anybody here indifferent, apathetic at work? Again, I appreciate your honesty. This is a really tough spot to be in, right? You'll find yourself saying, it's a job, it's a paycheck, it's something I can do, right? It's maybe not my career, it's not in line with my goals. But it keeps the bills paid, right? Keeps food on the table for my family. This is a really, really challenging position, right? I believe this is the worst position that you can be in because it doesn't hurt enough to make you change, right? This is a position of stagnation. Hopefully some of my thoughts today will help you get through it. Is anybody here just completely in love with what they do? Overjoyed with work, right? Awesome. This is an area where I find myself more frequently now that I'm at Test Double, okay? It's not necessarily like you jump from one and once you're there, you never leave, right? You bounce through all these phases quite a bit. But I really find myself more often than not waking up, jumping right into work now, right? Even when I'm going to bed, I'm thinking about things with work, right? Maybe this is not the healthiest for me, but at least I find that I enjoy what I do. I love the people that I do it with, all right? We just had a company retreat a week ago, and it's a highlight of my year. I get to see people that we as a virtual company don't get FaceTime with a lot, get to interact with them, figure out ways to make our company better. To me, that's like the pinnacle of my year. Right? Everybody deserves this. Has anybody heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Yes.
Yes? All right, so some of you haven't. I'll give you kind of the Cliff's Notes of this. All right? So it's this theory that basically there are differing levels, right, of fulfillment and happiness that we all experience. And to move up this hierarchy, you have to take care of the levels below it, okay? So at the bottom level, you basically have physiological needs, right? These are things like food, air, water, right? I'm assuming all of you have this taken care of, right? If you're able to pay for a conference or be employed with a company that will pay for you to go to this conference, this is probably something that you don't have to worry about, but we did pass a few homeless people on the way in last night. Obviously, these are things that they're challenged with on a day-to-day basis. The next level above that, right, is security. All right, so these are things like You have housing, you have shelter, you're not being assaulted by a spouse or something like that. And further, maybe you have some financial security, right? Like you have enough of a nest egg set aside where should the economy collapse again, you're taken care of, all right? After that, you start to get into what I feel are more of the happiness and kind of fulfilling, really joyful levels, right? Next level is belonging, feeling like you're part of a social network, like you have deep and meaningful relationships with others, right? Above that, you have something that's referenced as self-esteem, typically in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, okay? So self-esteem basically is that others respect and value you and your work, right? More importantly, you value your work. You feel like you're moving along a path of mastery with what you're doing day to day, right? Which is really hard at software development because, as Justin said, we have no idea what we're doing most of the time, right? Or how to measure it. The top of this pyramid is a phase that Maslow called self-actualization, all right? So this is the part to me where you want to get to. This is the position of becoming the greatest version of yourself that you possibly can be, okay? But really, what I've found is that this picture I have here doesn't accurately represent it, all right? This is a little bit more accurate, right? We're constantly in flux on this hierarchy of needs, especially with our work, right? We're constantly moving up and down this hierarchy. And at times, we really don't know where we are with it, right? The challenge between happiness and indifference is sometimes you don't know. Like you're happy one day, a month, two rolls along, all of a sudden you're like, man, I'm just not as challenged at work as I used to be, not as happy as I used to be. At the ends of the spectrum, you get it, right? When you have pure and utter joy and you feel like you're really at the top of the pyramid, you know it, right? When you don't have food to put on the table, you obviously know that as well. Everywhere in between those is really challenging. And the problem is, when we get in between, we hang on to the things that we can see. Money, title, right? Getting to work in the right programming language. These things, it's my contention, aren't as important. All right, so this talk is about finding joy, right? To me, this is the art of moving up this pyramid, of getting at least some self-awareness of where you're at within this pyramid and how you're kind of moving along this path, right? It's taken me over 15 years to even try to get my thoughts down into a slide deck about this. And a lot of times it's really taken me much longer to figure out, really what it is I want out of work. The challenges that I've had, I've been held back from moving up this pyramid because I didn't know what I wanted, right? Or I had conflicting priorities with what I wanted. Maybe I feared change. Maybe I stayed at jobs too long because I was too scared to make a move, right? Or I believed the words of a company instead of their actions. Finally, maybe I just focused on circumstance instead of focusing on myself. So those are the things we're going to talk about today. All right. First mistake, or first challenge, I guess, really understanding what it is that you want. All right. Anybody fresh out of college? No? Yeah? Still in college. Awesome. All right, so I'll rewind back to when I was in college. And I'm like the old guy at test level, so that was actually a while ago now. I was coming out of college, and I was a little bit ill-prepared to enter the workforce. But for the most part, I was really financially strapped. Right? I was at those lower levels of the pyramid. I know for a fact I spent $129 on most meals. You guys know how I know this? Close. So Taco Bell, you can get 2 bean burritos, as much hot sauce as you want, and a water for $1.29, right? Like you're full. This has lasting side effects that are not pleasant, right? But it does leave you a healthy staple of beer money while you're in college. So good thing. All right, so when I was coming out of college, I had no idea what I was looking for in an employer, really what I was looking for in a career. I had no clue. So I got a job offer, I think it was $40,000 was my salary coming out of school. So I pretty quickly did the math, and I'm like, that's like 70,000 burritos. Yeah, I'll take it, right? And it's funny how I just happened into this job, but what was really cool is that I loved my first job out of college. I was learning. All right, I got extremely lucky to be thrust in this environment where it wasn't just technology. I have garbage collection written up here. I was doing Java at the time. But coming out of school, I was really woefully prepared to do software development as a profession. but I knew how to learn. And that was probably my biggest strength at this company. And the good thing was I was surrounded by really, really smart people. Okay, so for those of you who are still in college, those of you who are recently coming out of college, I would posit to you that finding an environment of learning, really, really key for you early on. Helps you level up extremely quickly. All right, so I was extremely happy with this. There was no end to my learning. All right, small conversations about Java and technology and things like that, and really career-altering conversations about things like extreme programming, reading Kent Beck, right? Reading about agile practices, things like that. Those things had a profound effect on my career looking back, right? But I was extremely happy here. I was surrounded by really, really smart people, learning a lot. Right, so the company did a funny thing. They started to see all of the learning that was happening, and they saw that it was, a select few that were really responsible for leveling up all these people. All right, so they had this mindset of like, look, we need to lock these people in. These people are key to who we are and what we're doing. All right, so they came up with this like crazy like hierarchy of titles that you could achieve, and compensation that went along with that. Right? So like senior lead architect or senior technical specialist, things like that, right? So that was intended to basically celebrate and reward those people who are in these positions of learning. But the way they did it was they structured the performance reviews so that basically people were rewarded when they were the lone expert of a technology or business domain. Right? This had a kind of a perverse incentive. All of a sudden, these people who are experts, who used to willingly share information with you, who would take times out of their day to help level up your skills, started being a little bit harder to have meaningful conversations with. All right? And this didn't happen overnight, but it was gradual, right? Eventually, it became this. Right? What was once a culture of learning, right, turned into a culture of knowledge hoarding. And it makes sense looking back, right? If I'm a senior lead technical architect specialist, I have no idea what the title was. It was something like that, right? If that was my title, I'm disincented to help you achieve that same title because there was only a limited pool of these things that went around. If everybody knew what I knew, I wasn't that special anymore, right? People started believing that it was more important to get their own solutions into production than it was the right solution. Right? Egos started taking over with this. It obviously wasn't what was intended, but it was a horrible environment to be in. So I realized at the end of this, learning was something that was extremely key for me. And I didn't know it at the time. I knew it once it got taken away from me. And some of you may have experienced something similar, right? Like you don't know what you got till it's gone, right? This was definitely the case with this job. So eventually I left. And I became a consultant. Right? Consultants, consulting as a profession is a great way to get a wide breadth of experience. I tell everybody who's coming into Test Double about this who hasn't done consulting in the past that if you want to learn new technology, new business domains, new processes, how to have difficult conversations with clients, go to consulting. It's a fantastic way to learn. Right? And this resulted in my fire being rekindled. Right? I was happy again. I was extremely excited. And then an odd thing happened. So I was working, I'm from Central Ohio, and I worked in a local company down there. And there was about 200 consultants, I think, at this employer. Around 80 of them were all at one client, right? Huge client down in Columbus. And we had an admin email accident, right? This admin sent out this email, it had the spreadsheet attachment to every one of the employees at this big client. You open up the spreadsheet, it's got everyone's names, positions, managers, bill rates, right? And this was hidden information from the consultants at the time. So what do you do in this position?
Don't ask for a higher salary.
That was next. First, I went and saw like, hey, what do I make, right? What am I pulling into the company? And I saw something ridiculous like $250 an hour. I'm like, what the Newton's going on here, right? Like, I think I made $80,000 this year, right? So you start doing the math, you're like, okay, I brought in somewhere around $400,000 for the company last year with what I worked. I kept 80 of it. So the company was, obviously a little worried by this. So they sent this big guy out to talk to you all about how this was just and fair, and he was citing things like health insurance. I'm like, come on, man! Like I know health insurance is like a messed up system, but it's not $320,000 a year. Pretty comfortable with that. Even worse, like you started seeing like other people on this spreadsheet, and you're just like, man, seriously, that guy bills out at double what I do. Like he's on the internet all day. He's not doing anything. He created 2 documents last week. That's it. Like, it was ridiculous. All right, so my eyes had been opened at this company. I really started seeing things. Right? The company was building at the time this new like 17,000 square foot office space. Neat. It costs a lot of money. Right? Sales reps are rolling into these meetings in custom tailored suits. It's a nice suit. Before they left to go golfing at a private country club at noon, driving away in their BMW M5, right? It's like, I like Beamers. Like, man, that would be cool. Right? The problem with this, and don't get me wrong, like Justin and I do a lot of the sales for Test Double. Sales is hard. If you're able to go out and drum up new business for a consulting company, more power to you. You should be rewarded for that. Right? It's really, really hard. Remember what I was telling you about this company and this client, though. This client had 80 people from my company. All right? Sales reps did nothing. All right? They did buzzword bingo with resumes and requirements. That was it. Right? Like, oh, I got an EJB and a spring here. Yep, match. Let's send them in. And people got placed. Like, there was no effort involved whatsoever. Right? The developers were doing all of the work. The consultants were doing all of the work. And again, they were getting a small pittance of the revenue. So I realized there was this huge divide in the company between those who delivered a ton of value and those who recouped a lot of the profit. And I could not get over this. At the end of it, all I saw was this divide. I couldn't take my eyes off of it. All right, so eventually I left. I realized that, look, there has to be equitable compensation for what you're doing at the company I'm going to work at. It's a huge priority for me. Standing on the backs of others is no way to run a business, not in the long term at least. All right, so first and foremost, you must understand what it is that's important to you. These are 2 examples that I've pulled from my past. Oftentimes you'll have a lot of things though, right? So there will be a lot of things that are important to you in your career. Very difficult to get all of them. All right, so you have to be able to prioritize as well. That first job I mentioned where it became, kind of the title senior lead architect game, I had actually started to rise up that hierarchy. I think I was senior lead technical specialist or lead senior tech, something like that. Anyways, I had started to go up that ladder, all right? And there is some value in that, right? Like, again, I was feeling respected by my peers and by my manager because they were acknowledging that I was doing good work and I was helping others to learn, right? I was really happy with this. But at the end, it wasn't a higher priority to me than learning. So I had to leave. Right? We interview a lot of people at Test Double. So I get the opportunity to talk to a lot of people who are unhappy in their jobs. I had someone tell me that they were happy with everything with their job. But they just did like this reorganization and they retitled everyone and he didn't get senior developer. So he left. I'm like, man, that's a horrible reason to leave a good job. Right? Isn't it? I don't know. Maybe he has some self-esteem issues, right? Maybe that was more important to him than things like learning. It seems like a really backward system to me if that's what your focus is. All right, similar, another consulting company I worked at, very focused on business value, providing business value to clients, which is great. This manifests itself a lot of times in agile transformations, okay? Big A agile, right? Like doing things by the Schwaber book. Right, so I was brought in, the first project I was brought in on was this fixed bid project, which we'll talk about fixed bids a little bit later in the talk. This project was really going in the tank, right? I was being the happy little agilist, and I was starting to track like burn down charts or burn up charts or something. And I was seeing that like, look, all of the work that they have and the progress that we're making, we're gonna finish about 2 months late. It's kind of a big problem on a 2-month project, right? You don't have to know a lot about the internals of the company financials to understand like that's not going to be a good situation. All right, so I was struggling with this. So I started diving in and trying to understand what is going on with this project. And what I found was we had a ton of really good back-end developers on this project. 80% of the complexity and uncertainty of our project directly in the front end, all in the browser. So these people were trying really hard to get up to speed on some of these technologies, implement them, and do it in a way that was maintainable, but they were struggling, right? Like they didn't have the experience. So I knew somebody who actually really was a good front-end developer, brought them in, or I was going to bring them in, made a pitch to my employer at the time. I was really nervous for this, right? Because I was trying to articulate, like, look, I'm going to shrink your margins to, basically zero by bringing this person in. But you're going to still at least get your costs back. You're not going to lose money on this project. So I was really nervous for this. So I present this to the CEO at the time. And I'll never forget, the CEO looked at me and was like, Todd, you want this person to come in and fix all these defects. In Agile, developers fix their own defects. I was like, who gives a crap about Agile, right? Like, we're hemorrhaging money out the door right now. Like, you want me to worry about checking a box at the end of this project that's going to be a total train wreck. But hey, it was an Agile train wreck, so we're all good. Right? I care about delivering software. Agile values help me do that. I don't give a crap about Agile, though, from a strict process standpoint. All right, finally, I shouldn't say finally on this point. It's premature ending like Justin. One of the employers I had started to get to a point where I was working directly with the CEO. And the CEO was formerly a CFO, formerly a CPA. It's very financially driven, right? Like that's all he understood was finances, right? I, meanwhile, was somebody who was a developer at heart. And I understood my team of about 60 people at the time, all developers, right? I focused on them. And we had some really talented people. The only problem with this was it was 2008. Anybody remember the tech scene in 2008? Not fantastic, right? Like it kind of had a financial meltdown. Consulting was really hard. So we had one person, someone who's still a friend of mine to this day. He was working at, a big client. He was bringing in a couple $100 an hour or whatever it was. And they had him just like doing random things. Like he was totally unchallenged and unfulfilled at this job. It was miserable. He would get a request to like go fix somebody's printer, right? Like he's a .NET developer. Like he's a really good .NET developer. And I'm going and like troubleshooting somebody's printer. Like that would make me want to jump out of the window. So I knew this guy was going to leave. And I had this conversation with the CEO at the time. I said, look, we got to do something. We got to get him out of there. The CEO is incredulous, right? Like, you want to walk away from, us making money on this guy? I'm like, he's going to quit. I know he's going to quit. Eventually he did. The CEO told me, he's like, I can find 5 more of him off the street. And I was dumbstruck, right? Like, we had to interview 500 people to find 5 like him. Like, and that took forever. I could find 5 chuckleheads on the street, no doubt about it, but finding 5 of him was really, really hard. So it was really clarifying in my head at that time. Like, I valued developer happiness above the profits of the company. He was exactly the opposite, right? So we butted heads almost on a daily basis about this, right? It took a while for me to realize this disparity. Once I realized I had to leave. Right? Even then, when I realized I was completely out of alignment with the CEO of my company, it took me a long time to leave. Right? Some of you who are indifferent or even frustrated right now with your jobs, what is keeping you there? I guarantee you can find 5 people at this conference who will hire you. You could have a new job starting next week. What is keeping you there? All right? Same things that used to keep me in jobs I wasn't extremely fulfilled with. It's fear. Right? Each one of these instances, each one of these 3 jobs I left before I started test level, I stayed too long, and I stayed too long because of fear. Right? Cloud your mind. Right? You start to justify it. Well, I couldn't leave because of this, that, or the other. And it's all crap. Right? The first job I mentioned, the culture of hoarding instead of learning, I developed a lot of meaningful relationships with people. I had a ton of friends there. This was before I had kids, so we were playing hockey together. We were working late. These people were just really, really good friends of mine. And I really struggled to imagine a world where I would maintain these relationships after leaving. Right? There's a problem with this logic, though. Right? If they're really good friends of mine, I'm going to maintain those relationships anyways. Right? Furthermore, maybe they aren't that good of friends if they're going to stay in a job that was that miserable anyways, right? Maybe our value systems don't line up that well. So eventually I left once I realized that. Second job I mentioned, I did have 60 developers reporting to me at one point, and it was 2008. Right, so we had these miserable Monday morning meetings, right, where we were lining up the sales pipeline with people on the bench, right? And it was just like constant. Well, we don't have work, these people need fired. Don't have work, these people need fired. I felt like this, ownership, this protective, I had to be Superman for these people. I had to stand up for them and make sure they didn't get fired. Again, this is the mentality that kept me there, but there's a problem with this logic. I had absolutely no authority, right? I couldn't keep these people there if I wanted to. Further, I couldn't even influence the CEO, right? Like, he was totally financially driven. He didn't care about these people. So once I came to that realization, I understood, look, I can try my darndest to keep these people here. It's not going to change anything. So I left. The last position that I left, this was definitely a factor of why I stayed. I would guess that for many of you, this is still a factor of why you stay at jobs. Like I said, we get the opportunity to interview a ton of people at Test Double, and Justin and I are usually involved in every one of them. The most common reason I hear for people, staying in crappy jobs is that they can't make what they're making elsewhere. You ever stop and think about why that is? If you're extremely overpaid in your current position, why is that? I'm an employer, right? Like, I see it from both sides now. If I'm an employer, I'm trying to pay you a fair market wage, right? That's what I'm trying to do. If somebody else is saying, I'm going to pay you 50% more than what you're worth, why is that, right? Is it just because you're that awesome, or is it because their environment's that bad? Most of the times it's the latter, right? They call them golden handcuffs, right? They're still handcuffs, right? Doesn't matter if they're golden. They're trapping you in an environment that is less than fulfilling. You have to see this, right? Have you guys ever heard of, there's something called hedonic adaptation? Has anybody ever heard of this? I'll reference a book later. Or they call it the hedonic treadmill also. So it's this concept that you can have a hugely positive or hugely negative thing happen to you, and your happiness resets after a short period of time, back to where it was. Right? Does anybody know a lottery winner, personally or anything? Right? Lottery winners consistently get really, really happy for like 30 days. And then you find them after 2 years, they've lost all the money and they're miserable, right? It's almost like the opposite of the adaptation, right? Like, they go south quickly, right? Similarly, people who get, diagnosed with kidney failure and things like that, they get the news that, hey, you're going to have to go on dialysis for 8 hours a week for the rest of your life, right? Huge impact. After about 30 days, they reset. They're back to the levels of happiness that they were before. Why is that, right? Again, my last job, I took a significant pay cut when I came to Test Double. Well, technically, Justin knows, I took a 100% pay cut when I came to Test Double, right? he and I were the first two there, right? So funny thing, you want to start a consulting company, it seems like a really good idea. And then after 2 weeks, you get to invoice somebody. It's like, oh, whew. And that's after you find a client, which may or may not be day one, right? So then, clients typically pay whenever they want to pay, right? Like, you can try to be like, oh, we're net 15 or whatever. It doesn't matter. They pay when they want to pay. Usually it's around 30 to 45 days, right? So we had this whole span of, 3 months or so where we didn't make any money. So took a 100% pay cut right around Christmas time, which was fantastic. It's a challenge for the family that year. But, obviously things have reset and we're doing well. But again, that fear of starting out with no income was huge, right? And it kept me in this job for way too long. You can't let it be what drives you. There's never been an opportunity, more like right now, where you can actually reset expectations. You can downsize. You can do a lot of things that hopefully limit the amount of money that you're spending so that you have a little bit more freedom. So you can accept maybe a lateral or even a lower paying job if it's something that'll make you happier. I really like this quote by Amelia Earhart, and it really frames basically the thought process I've had every time I've ever looked at leaving a job. I would almost have my mind made up that I was going to leave, and then I would come up with all of these reasons why I couldn't leave. And they're all crap, right? They're all paper tigers. You need to move on. Okay, so that's the first three. Last two, right? Follow actions. Does anybody here, does their company have a mission statement? Yeah, good one?
Yeah.
Is it like 240 words or less?
No, it's like one sentence.
One sentence? Okay.
I don't remember
Okay. All right, so we didn't start out with a mission statement at Test Double. And further, like every time I mention mission statements, Justin kind of curls into the fetal position and puts his fingers in his ear and starts, la, 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 la. He just doesn't want to hear about it, right? There are some good mission statements, but a lot of them are like this. Right? I won't make you read all of this because it's painful, but there's some highlights of this one that I really like, right? Like first, it talks about focusing on share owners. Oh, that's awesome, right? Because you're probably starting out as an employee there and you own jack of shares, so you know where you rank. And then they talk about safety being the first consideration, yet it's listed all the way like fourth. So obviously safety isn't the first consideration, right? These are the reasons why we struggle with mission statements, right? It's because it's a lot of crap like this, right? They mean nothing. Furthermore, they're so contradictory, like companies can't even live up to them if they wanted to. There are some good ones though. Has anybody ever heard Disney's? I think it's old Disney's, like the new corporate Disney's one that looks like this. It's real, ridiculous. Disney's mission statement used to be, we make people happy. Wow, that accurately describes what Disney does, right? Maybe with the subtext of we make a boatload of money making people happy, right? We charge you an arm and a leg to make you happy. Maybe that should be what it is, right? But you understand what they're about, right? You can see what it is that is their purpose, and you can see it at a glance, unlike this. All right, so at Test Double, like I said, we didn't start out with any level of mission statement. We really started out more with the set of values that we kind of held dear. Probably the top of which is autonomy, right? We're a virtual company. And maybe that started out because we're cheap and lazy and we didn't want to buy an office. Maybe it was intentional, I don't know. But being a virtual company, you have to trust your people to do what's right by your clients and what's right by your company, all right? That's the autonomy story that we tell, right? It's really easy to tell that story though. It's much harder to live up to it in the day-to-day practices. Zach Briggs used to work with us. He is a really good developer, and I think his first project with us only lasted like 4 weeks or something like that. So he came out of his first project, hit the bench, and we didn't have a ton of work at the time. So we're a little bit nervous, cautious about this, but we had this opportunity come up with, it could have been a really big deal with the big client. So we start talking to Zach about this, and one of the things that we hold dear is he's called it the choose your own adventure aspect of Test Double, right? We don't force people into projects, right? We have open conversations. People can elect if they want to go to a project or not, right? It's their choice, right? I may try to influence you, that's still fair game, but I can't command you to go to work for a client, right? So I started talking with Zach about this project, and I could tell, Zach would speak his mind, I could tell that Zach wasn't super comfortable with this. So we started talking about, all the technology, what the environment was like, all these other things. And at the end of it, he just said, I don't think it's a good fit for me. Right? So I'm presented with this situation where I have a decision to make. I can live up to our values and say, you know what, you're right. Let's move on. Or I can say, no, you really got to go do this. So fortunately, I made the right decision. I said, totally right. Let's move on. We'll find something else. And we did. All right, so I know I mentioned fixed bids earlier. Has anybody ever done a fixed bid, fixed scope project? Yeah, it worked out great, right? A lot of fun. I joke that fixed bids are like eating White Castles, right? So for those of you who know what White Castles are, they're little slider hamburgers. So about every 2 years, I'll get drunk enough and it'll be like 2 in the morning, I'll go and I'll eat White Castles, right? makes a lot of sense at the time. And then you have immediate and lasting regrets, like, right after doing this, all right? Fixed bids are exactly the same way, all right? Fixed bids, and Justin talked about this a little bit with the RFP process. Fixed bids put us in a tough spot. Another two of our values are trust and quality, right? We want to have a level of craft in all of the work that we do. Fixed bids, you're asking us to either, one, work on a problem that is so mundane, so simple, that it can be easily scoped from the beginning when we know least about it. Our people like working on challenging projects, right? So that's not going to work. Two, it's usually not a simple project. You're asking us to scope something that we've never done before in some level, all right? You're asking us to put a price tag on that. Really, really hard. And you know we're not going to account for everything. So we wind up building on something, and then we're put in this position where we can either work a lot more hours to get it back on track, in which case our company profits tank, or we can sacrifice your quality, right? It's not something that we're willing to do, right? We don't ever want to be in that position. So we don't do fixed bids. All right, finally, we've talked a lot about developer happiness since starting this company. Justin and I actually framed it as a developer rescue organization for a while. That sounds good, but we really do consider developer happiness to be paramount. Kevin actually, who's here, he wound up working on the project that Zach had turned down. And Kevin was much better fit for it. He had a lot more experience. He was comfortable with the technology. He and two others wound up working on this client. And it was almost death by like 1,000 paper cuts, right? It didn't start out bad. We started out working well. We were adding value. Client was happy. And then it was just like little things constantly. They weren't integrated. They didn't want to pair with us. They didn't want to learn from us, right? Their product owner was disengaged. The liaison to the product owner was, annoyed whenever we asked them questions. All these little things just kept like eating away at us, eating away at us, eating away at us. And I got a pretty good sense from Kevin and the others on the team that it just wasn't a good environment. It wasn't an environment where they were happy working, right? They were starting to hear 60 Minutes clock on Sunday evenings and be like, oh God, I got to go work for that client tomorrow, right? This is not a situation that we want to be in. So eventually, these guys are total pros, right? Like they tried to work through it. They tried to rearrange the engagement with the client so that it would be successful. They worked really hard to do this. And at the end of the day, we just couldn't get it to a state where they were going to be happy. So I finally lived up to our values and asked them, do you want me to pull you? And these guys were great about it. They discussed it internally, came back to me and said, yep. All right, so this was a tough situation for us. There were 3 of, I think, 10 developers that we had billing at the time. All right, so 30% of our revenue was basically going to go away immediately. And we didn't have a ton of work coming at the time either. All right. It was a really challenging, further, pulling out of a client can really damage your brand, right? All these things were swirling around in our minds. But again, if we're a developer happiness organization, we can't let people sit in environments like that. So we pulled them. All right, final point. The book I referenced was The How of Happiness by Sonia Lyubomirsky, something like that. All of the things I've talked about so far are external. All right. Sonia is a psychologist who's done a lot of research into happiness. Right? What she and her team have found is that 50% of your happiness is basically like a genetic set point, right? Happy or you're not. You're born that way. Similar to, I was really challenged as a basketball player because I was born to a family of hobbits, right? So we're really short, furry people. We're a little bit rotund. Like if we were less rotund, we could be jockeys, but we don't even get that, right? So you have a genetic set point similarly for happiness, right? That's where you start off. What percentage do you think is the things around you? 10%. 10% is your environment, your context. 40% is all in between your ears, all in your head, all up to you. All right? There are some things that you can do to drastically affect this. Does anybody know Dave Giard? Yeah. Yep. He's awesome. What does he do on Twitter? Every day. Logs one thing that he's grateful for. And it seemed like kind of like just a like, oh, that's kind of cool, like campy thing. He's been doing it for like 2 years, all right? This isn't something that he's just, doing as a gag, right? Further, there's a lot of research that shows they did this with severely depressed people. So they had a control group, and then they had this group that they challenged to log 3 positive things a day for a month. And it took them from severe to mild depression. What they're finding is that you're actually rewiring the pathways in your brain to be more positive, to see things from a grateful perspective. These are all simple things that you can do. Right? There's a ton of other ones referenced in that book. 5 acts of kindness, creating a positive workspace with a lot of pictures of your family and good memories and things like that. Even having something like, hey, it's movie night on Thursday, so you have something to look forward to. All these little things can actually make you significantly more happy in your day-to-day jobs. The one that I've probably noticed the most that I've been implementing is exercise. Right? I know you're looking at me thinking, man, that guy must exercise a lot. He's really fit. Did he run here from Columbus? Yes, I did. No, I did not. About 5 years ago, though, I, for some reason, said, I'm going to run a half marathon. And I said this publicly, and people heard me, and then they held me to it. And I guess if you want to go all in, that's the way to do it. But really, I had no idea kind of what this would start. So with me, it started this model of really exercising consistently 3 to 5 days a week. And I've been doing it for about the last 5 years. It's funny to me, looking back, how little things used to just become huge issues in my mind, right? Little issue. I mean, I'm a computer programmer, right? Like the vast majority of my day is fighting with NPM or something, right? Like it's absolutely brutal. You just want to shove a hot poker in your eye, right? But that was before I started running. Now I just I want to punch my screen a little bit, but instead I take a jog, blow off some steam, and immediately I start being able to think more creatively about solutions to problems. It's a little thing that you can do, and you don't have to run, right? It's any amount of exercise. Results in a lower resting heart rate. When you have a lower resting heart rate, things don't flare you up as much as they used to. Right? It's simple. All right, this is my final point. So final point. All of the things I've talked about so far are very selfish, and I've been a very selfish person throughout the vast majority of my career. All right? We didn't start Test Double from a position of selfishness. Well, I shouldn't say that. We kind of started Test Double from a position of selfishness. Right? We didn't necessarily know what we wanted, but we knew we weren't finding it. So we wanted to find something better for us. As we've progressed and as we've grown, though, I find the vast majority of my time, my energy, my thoughts are focused more on how I can help our people become the best versions of themselves, how I can help them achieve their goals, right? The thing that this does is it creates this altruistic, positive spiral in your workplace. And you don't have to be an employer to do this, right? Just helping people out within your job. Kevin's great at, if I ever have an issue with complex Ruby problem or I want to learn Clojure or something like that, I just reach out on Slack, Kevin will help me out. Our whole team is like this. I can't tell you how much it changes your mood to come into an environment of work like that than it does to come into one where everybody's selfish. All right. So again, Maslow actually kind of disputed his earlier work on the hierarchy of needs and claimed that there was a higher level than what he had previously articulated called self-transcendence. And this quote was around that. So he's basically talking about, finding a goal outside of yourself, right? Helping others, doing something that has lasting impact beyond you if you really want to achieve true happiness and transcendence. All right, so summarize. Understand what it really is that you want out of work, right? What it is that you want out of your life. There will be a lot of things, right? As you look back and when you were happiest in your career, you'll get a lot of different things, right? Make sure you understand where they rank priority-wise, right? Don't be afraid to act change. Definitely don't act out of fear. Follow the actions of your current employer. Employers say a lot of great things. How they live up to them is much more important. And most importantly, start within yourselves. All right? Then you'll find the love. Thank you very much. These awesome people on the Noun Project gave me all those images. My name's Todd at Test Double. Thanks. Any questions?